It's very fascinating because we'll get into this in a second. It's an easy process to extract these cells, right? And it's very much, a lot of people know PRP and extracting and running it through centrifuge and kind of getting down. So can you take us through that, what the process would be like of actually getting those V cells and then using them for therapy?
So like I said, they're floating around in your blood or in your bone marrow. Well, stem cells basically come from your bone marrow. There's a few that come directly from other tissues, but I do certain other processes that to kind of encourage more stem cells to come into circulation. But once they're in your blood, we literally just do a blood draw. So you don't have to harvest them from your hip where you get some of the
Hmm.
kind of cells or your fat tissue and spin them down. This is a simple blood draw. And like you mentioned, the way that we kind of separate out, well, the B cells should be in the plasma, not the red cells. So we spin it down like PRP to kind of clear out the tissues that we don't want. And we take that fragment. Again, all you have is an IV in your arm. And then we activate them with a specific type of light or frequency because it's not within the visual spectrum. Um, and we have some time that we now have a PRP fragment with all its growth factors and all the lovely juices of plasma and activated stem cells. And then we can reinfuse them into your IV, again, painless.
Hmm.
And I can tell you how we get them to go where, if you want, where we guide them to where we want them to go. Um, and that's the extent of getting them from your body and putting them in. Now, granted, we can also inject them into joints, do facials, do all the other things that you can do with other forms of stem cells and exosomes and PRP. Uh, to me, it's like PRP on steroids or some
Yeah.
cut little because you have all of that regenerative properties plus stem cells and exosomes because exosomes are in PRP and they're the product of stem cells. So it's like a golden mixture.
Well, like you said, it is PRP a little bit on steroids, but it's also precision kind of PRP with stem cells, even more regenerative. And I found it really interesting also because, when you do PRP, platelets also are kind of these signalers too, to where to go in a sense. But then you can even go further with the V cells as to where you want to apply them. And in medicine, that's one of the toughest things. Even
It,
I remember on the panel, Zach was there from Austin Biotech and saying, we throw the stem cells in there and they go through the, real process into the hip, procedural sort of, pulling it out of the bone marrow, painful somewhat. But, they're using it for fertility. But how do you absolutely know they're going to the ovaries when you do the systemic kind of
right.
approach to it? And that's where I found it really interesting with the V cell therapy because you're using, again, you give them that frequency and then they look and then you apply that frequency correct to where you want it. So go into that a little bit about how you're being so precise of where these V cells are going.
Exactly. So during the infusion, when we put it back into your arm and we are pushing it through, we have about 25, science is still out there, but the studies are showing we have about 25 minutes, 30 minutes max of telling those stem cells where to go. Because stem cells, by definition, again, are regenerative. So my example I always give, if you stubbed your toe that morning and I gave you stem cells, they're like, oh, signal, you have pain there. I need to go there and fix your toe. But I'm like, no, you've got some dementia, you got some heart failure. I want you to come over here. And so how we guide them is again that frequency, that uh, specific wavelength. That stem cell already recognized and it carries that signature. And so when we take that same, it looks like a laser, and
Mhm.
point it onto the part of the body that we want them to go, they recognize it and they are drawn to it, just like a chick to its mother or a homing
Yeah.
device. And so if I put it on your brain right there in the substantia nigra, and if you have Parkinson's disease, they will go there. And as stem cells do, they'll create their cell adhesions and it's like stickiness and they stay there. And then that regenerative process and signal goes on for weeks to months. And so it's there. Exosomes will go and they have the juiciness, but they don't have the capacity to stay.
Mm.
Uh, and so we can do that for your shine on your heart. We can do that on your gonads. So if your testes or your ovaries, it's a different way than Zach would do. Um, and the reason we believe and the reason we know that they go where we want them to go is one by clinical outcome. But the other is the example like I like to give, which is very visual. And if you've ever done any science and you have a petri dish and you know that to know where something is, you tag it. So they took the V cells that they had just activated and they painted it across to this agar. And they took the laser and they set it down and it would shine a light across or would shine across the agar. They left, they came back, and then they gave whatever they needed to give to highlight where that tagged cell was. They basically lit it up. And those stem cells were in perfect line where
Mm,
laser was. They literally had migrated across the agar because they were attracted to it. And
mm.
that's what they stayed. And that's, I mean, that's an agar. I mean, that's a outside the body way of looking at where they go, but it gives you an idea that they are attracted and they are recognized by that frequency. So that allows us now, because they're so small and they can cross the blood-brain barrier, we can address neurologic conditions, visual issues, returning around heart failure. And they, in a 3D form, we can tell them where to go. And that just, that excites me to no end because
Right.
it's a painless way to address stuff that we've never been able to move the needle on before.
Yeah. And it's just, frequency in a way, of course, energy, information. So if you're providing that information, you're basically saying, hey, come here. You're ringing that bell and everything. And they follow that information, which is in a frequency pattern. Now, one of the things that I know in PRP is common sometimes is the ability to count how many platelets you're providing, platelet counter or something. Is there a way to do that with V cells where you know how many V cells are being injected?
There, I've caught wind that there is technology, and there's some people out there that are trying to do this. And so I know
Yeah.
that you can, because that's how the studies were done initially.
Yeah.
At the bedside right now, we don't have that, but it's coming.
Yeah.
So we go by what we assume is an average of how many billions of stem cells, excuse me, we have in a typical infusion, which is about 70 cc's. Um, Apart from the research, we can't quantify it in real time yet, though I know the technology is out there, and pretty soon it is going to be something that I'm going to be applying so that we know. Because even though we know or that they don't age and we have plenty, we also know that one's capacity, their bone marrow in general, de decreases with age. And so you would have to think that the volume eventually would also be affected of the volume of potential stem cells.
Hmm.
Now, the potency and the virulence of them are going to be the same if they are V cells, but maybe the capacity or the volume that we have may vary from a 6'5",
Sure.
250 person and a little 4.2, 4 foot person. Um, maybe not. And so I do know that the technology is out there. Ideally, it would be something practitioners will be able to have at the bedside to quantify. Okay, maybe I need a few more tubes,
Yeah.
or maybe, yeah. So this is very new, and maybe I don't even know all the new stuff that's out there for sure. But it's exciting that we do understand that there's a certain number that we are getting good effects,
Hmm.
and the possibility of being able to even quantify and do more research is in active practice.